Now you can hear me? Yeah. Hello and welcome. I was actually supposed to accompany the panels here tomorrow, but a colleague asked me to stand in for him during the next interview part. Since I already had the 3 participants in my podcast, I hope I can make this an exciting conversation for you without so much preparation. It's a real pleasure to have 3 true legends here, true legends of the Amiga and gaming history. They are with us today. First, from Sensible Software, we have Stoo Cambridge, the artist behind classics like Cannon Fodder and Sensible Soccer. Stoo. Joining us as well is Simon Butler, one of the industry's most experienced graphic artists, known for his work on Ocean titles and many others. Welcome on stage. And finally, from Revolution Software, we have Tony Warriner, co-founder and key programmer behind Beneath a Steel Sky and, for example, Broken Sword. First, some questions for all of you 3. When you look back at the Amiga era, what made it such a special platform for you as developers or artists?
Hello. For me as an artist, it was the power to do pretty much what you wanted. You know, at the time, you had the Commodore 64, which was a great machine, but the leap forward that the Amiga gave you as a developer was just from the future, you know, and it just allowed you to basically experiment. You could do stuff that you could never do before. And you could go to the arcades and you could see arcade machines and you could copy those things and put them on the Amiga. You know, and this is like the 90s. This is like the late 80s, the 90s. So it was pretty incredible. And that really kind of fueled your creativity to really go to town with whatever you wanted to create. Yeah, that's it for me, I think.
The Amiga basically meant that I handed in my notice at Ocean Software. There was a group meeting, and I asked the question, when is Ocean going to move into the 16-bit era, and was told on the spot that Ocean had no plans at that moment in time to embrace 16-bit. So within the hour, I had resigned and started work on the Amiga. So my career just took off in a completely different direction.
I would say the same as Stu in a way. I mean, we were programming Spectrums and Commodore 64s, and you know, when you moved to the Amiga, suddenly it was just a huge world opened up. The Z80 processor was, you know, tiny little 8-bit thing, and suddenly you had 16 bits and you had all this memory. There was no bank switching. You know, you had hardware sprites, you had the blitter. And yeah, you could kind of imagine what you could do, and look, and you say look at the arcades and look at other games, and it's just so much. It's like multiples bigger than the 8-bit era. You know, it's just super exciting.
And how did the hardware limitations of the Amiga influence your creativity?
The biggest restriction I found was that I don't know which mic's doing that. The biggest restriction I found was to get the real speed out of it, you had to go to 16 color mode, which wasn't such a hardship initially because you was used to 8-bit machines like the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum. But it was a challenge to get the most out of those 16 colors. You know, like take a game like Sensi Soccer or Cannon Fodder, you really had to work those palettes to make the machine look the way you wanted it. Having said that, at the time, it wasn't a big deal because the excitement of working on this machine that felt like it had fallen through a time portal from the future was just overwhelming, you know. So for me, it was just a fantastic, you know, machine to work on. Yeah.
I found that I wanted to do more than any of the games would allow. I'd be saying, well, can't we have X amount of frames? And the coder was saying, no. And so I was always found guilty of throwing things in that the coder would eventually say, Simon, you're going to have to like strip that back down and get it into 8-frame walk or 6-frame walk, which I found frustrating at one point. But like Stu says, it was the palette. The one thing that stuck with me was a project I worked on that went nowhere. It took It took 2 years and then eventually died. It was called Universal Monsters, which was just supposed to be a cute little sort of isometric adventure. But then Universal, as Ocean always do, they slap a license on something. And I said, okay, Universal Monsters, that's cool. I'll draw Frankenstein and Dracula. But I wasn't allowed to draw them cute. I had to draw them life-size, which then meant that all the backgrounds had to be in proportion. And as Stu said, you had to get everything in that one damn palette. And it was a nightmare. But there's some graphics online, it's still existing from it. And it doesn't look too bad, but the game was doomed from the start. But not because of anything that the Amiga did. The Amiga brought problems. It opened new horizons, but it also brought a whole new set of problems. You left all your 8-bit issues behind, and you walked into a whole brand new shit show.
I noticed that artists, they only ever complain about palettes. Our programmer, the biggest restriction was floppy disk. The publisher would say you're only allowed 5 floppy disks or something. So that, that was the main restriction of how big a game was going to be. I think when we did Beneath a Steel Sky, we got it up to 15 floppy disks. It's probably the most any game ever had. So that's an achievement.
Yeah, back at that days, did you realize that the games you were making at that early days still will be remembered today and will be played arcades later?
That's a good question. At the time, and I was quite a bit younger, and you kind of like knew you was working on something special because people were really giving good feedback in the press. So you'd read magazine previews and they'd be like, yeah, this game's really good, it's coming out from Sensible Software, this is going to be amazing. And you'd see it in print, and don't forget, back then there was no internet. So the only feedback we got as developers was what the press was telling you. And it was crazy. Just posing for RJ there. It was crazy, because the press was like, you're either on your side or they wasn't. So when you look now, and when you look back at that time, you think, wow, those games we did are still remembered today. But at the time, I had no idea. I mean, if someone had told me I'd be sitting on a stage in Germany in 2025 talking about Cannon Fodder, Sensible Soccer, I'd have said, that was so stupid. Yeah, crazy, So yeah, it's quite remarkable and very much appreciated, I'd say, for all you guys who supported our games. Very much appreciated. Because without you guys, we wouldn't make any other games. So yeah, so thank you.
I was answering this question earlier on to a friend, and I remember I was asked. It's along the same lines. It was, what was it like working at Ocean? Which kind of ties in with, did you think this was going to last that long? And I remember looking at a room, not dissimilar to this. A lot more men than girls, and they were all sort of middle-aged ex-schoolboys. And they all went, huh? And I said, anyone who imagines that I skipped into work at Ocean every day, and it was like Hogwarts, and the sky was filled with rainbow unicorns and flying monkeys, is fucking insane. It was just a job. To me, that's all it was. I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every single minute of it. And 42 years later, I still have the same passion. But it was just a job. It paid the bills. And if anyone had walked in and said, the video game industry died 5 minutes ago, we all would have gone and worked in a factory or something. We never thought it had legs. We never thought it had longevity. Because we never bought into the hype that we and what we were creating was anything special. It was entertaining, but we weren't rock stars. And anyone who says they were Fucking liar.
I mean, you're certainly right. It was extremely difficult writing games. You know, that's the key thing about them. I don't think any game project has ever been easy. It's always a real struggle, and it always takes longer than you think. And you know, everyone's going crazy, and you think you're never going to finish, and sometimes you don't ever finish. You know, a lot of game projects go wrong. So it is nice when you get through it and the game comes out and it gets good reviews, and then people play it, and then, you know, as Stu says, you know, 25, 30 years later, people are asking us to sign the same game boxes. You know, it's really great, and we really appreciate it, because we're still making games, and because we love making games, and what else can we do? And you know, without the players, there'd be nothing. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, Stu, Cannon Fodder and Sensible Soccer are two of the most iconic Amiga titles. And how did you approach this art style and that becomes so recognizable? The characters, the personality, this rebellious creativity.
Well, I joined Sensible when they were finishing Megalomania. So that style was already established because it was to get as much information as you could on the screen. And you had a 320 by 240, 256 resolution. So you had to be really kind of like careful what you wanted to show, because you don't want to clog the screen up with lots of big sprites. So that look was purely down to game design. And it's really weird because we're known for those little tiny 11 pixel character sprites. But it was never a conscious decision to say, hey guys, let's make some little characters and we'll be known for that look. It wasn't like that at all. It was purely down to game design. You know, with Megalomania, it was to see as much as you can, to see all the little characters running around. And the same with Sensi Soccer. You wanted to see both teams and see all the players. And with Cannon Fodder, it was exactly the same approach. We couldn't have like, you know, we couldn't do the game in 640, 400 because the machine wouldn't have handled the speed. So we had to use the low res mode, and it was just a case of getting all those little characters moving around so you could see the whole thing. And strangely enough, it kind of worked, and we're kind of known for it. And today with this one, I'm still doing the same kind of size characters, not by conscious decision. It was just we needed to show the same, you know, amount on screen. So, but yeah, I mean, it's. But the Amiga, like Simon said about the palette, and I said about the palette, you had such a strong, vibrant palette to work from that it was like nothing you'd ever seen before, you know, and it really, really fueled your passion to do creative design, which you couldn't do on the machines. You were told sprites had to be like 4 colours, and you had to use like these colours. You couldn't change them. And all of a sudden you've got this big spectrum of colours, and you could go, right, well, I can design something. And that's pretty much how the look of all the stuff that we did was operated. So, yeah.
Simon, you worked on many titles for Ocean Software, one of the biggest publishers in Europe. And how did it feel to create graphics under such a pressure? And many of your projects were movie licensed, for example. And was it fun or more frustrating to only adapt things?
Working at Ocean was a double-edged sword, really. As you say, one of, if not the biggest publisher in Europe at that time. And I was financially rewarded very nicely. But the downside was that working in-house at Ocean meant that you were almost never allowed to work on original material. Everything had to be either an arcade conversion or a movie tie-in, which didn't really... Arcade conversions, you just had to do it pixel for pixel and hope that it looked like the arcade game. Movie tie-ins, you had a little bit more freedom, but not much. The nightmare there was that when we first started, movie studios stayed away, but only for about 5 minutes. They stayed away because they didn't understand what the whole medium was. But then they got involved and they understood even less. So they became an absolute millstone round your neck. why doesn't that 16 by 16 sprite look like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Well, you've just answered your own dumb fuck question, because it's 16 by 16, you asshole. So some guy in Las Vegas or Los Angeles is saying, well, why doesn't it look like this? I mean, I worked on an appalling game called Dennis, and they sent me one photograph of Walter Matthau to work from. And I was supposed to animate Walter Matthau and make him look like Mr. Wilson from one photograph. And as Stu pointed out, there was no internet. Couldn't go on the internet and find other images. You had to go with what they provided. And if they didn't provide anything, which was the case 9 times out of 10, you were fucked. So, like I say, Ocean had its ups and its downs.
Tony, Beneath the Steel Sky is one of the defining adventure games of the Amiga era. What technical or artistic challenges did you face in bringing such a cinematic story to the machine?
Well, as I said before, the discs were a big problem. I guess with Steel Sky, I mean, we were a really small team. There was like 6 of us at the beginning of it, and it was just such a big thing that we were stretched really thin. I mean, it was quite a lot of chaos and screaming and shouting and complaining, and but also a lot of passion. You know, we would be working like 7 days a week just to get the thing done. And there'd be like a Sunday team which would go in and we'd just do really creative things like doing extra jokes or Easter eggs and stuff. Because we were always there, always working on it. And it was super intense. And I think the challenge was just keeping it all together and trying to finish it before we ran out of money. So everything was stressing us. You know, the machine was stressing us. The money was stressing us. The timeline was stressing us. The sheer size of the game that we wanted to implement. But, you know, afterwards, when it's finished, the game comes out and then it's on the shelves and you go and see it in the shops the first time. It was all worth it, you know. So you forget all of that, instantly forgotten. And, you know, as I say, 25, 30 years later, it was still signing the boxes, so it was worth it.
Yeah. Stu, looking at today's indie scene, do you see parallels to what Sensible Software was doing back in the early 90s?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I think in terms of creativity, we kind of like took the money and did what we liked. So, today, you have to do a lot of work before you get the money. So if you have faith in what you're doing, then you can really, really push it and do whatever you want. And it's hard to make games. It is hard. But back then, I mean, we were fortunate enough to be able to create stuff that we wanted to do. You know, we had a lot of developers who didn't have that luxury. We were lucky. And it's led on to being able to do other things later in my life. And like today, as an indie developer, we can use that as a foundation to launch what we're doing today. So, but I mean, as an indie developer, you are doing everything yourself, you know, marketing, print, video editing, logos, everything you're doing yourself. It's a big task, and you have to treat it as, like Simon says, it's a job. You know, it's not like a hobby, so you have to take it seriously, but also have fun. You know, yeah.
Simon, makes or modern pixel art games today, what do they get right or wrong compared to the Amiga or older eras?
I don't think any of them get anything wrong. We got things wrong. We got a lot of things wrong because what people, well, I don't know whether people give it this much thought, but when I've been in the industry a little bit longer than these two. I came into the industry when there was no industry. I came in 1983. And it was just an idea then. A lot of people around the UK were, hey, there's these new things called home computers. Let's have a go. And we had nobody to turn to for help. There were no books on pixel art. As we've said, there was no internet. There was no reference in library. There was one book by, I think, Richard did Roger Rabbit and the Thief and the Cobbler, which was no use at all unless you wanted to do professional. And we didn't. There was nothing to teach us how to do pixel art. There were no tutorials about how to do tiled backgrounds. We had to make up the rules that today's industry is based on. And without blowing my own trumpet, I think that today's industry is as vibrant, as amazing, and as exciting as the industry has ever been. But those guys are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are those giants.
Tony, with Beyond Steel Sky, you revisited the universe decades later. How was it to return to something born on the Amiga?
In what sense?
How was it? You did it on for other machines, for example, but it started on the Amiga. Was it important for you?
Yeah. Well, much later, and much to our surprise, we did a port to the iPhone. That was something we never expected, and the main problem was we'd lost all the source code and lost all the graphics, and so we couldn't rebuild the game very easily. So we had to kind of well, first of all, we thought, let's play our game and see how big it is. We'd all forgotten how to play it, and it's quite a difficult game, Steel Sky. So we had to go on the internet to find a walkthrough to play our own game. It was too difficult. We were going, who designed this crap? You know, it's just impossible. So anyway, we played it through, and then we found, yeah, we'd given the sources originally, which were assembly code. We'd given them to ScumVM, and those guys had rewritten it in C. So we kind of went and had a look at that, and so that we knew how the engine worked. Then we just had to sort of deconstruct our own, disassemble our own game, and put it back into pieces. And then, so that was a big challenge. And then the other challenge was how to make it work on touchscreen. And I think we were one of the first people to do a really good touchscreen adventure game with point and click. You know, rather than emulating a mouse, we did like a touch the screen and the icons pop up, and we were quite proud of that. So yeah, I mean, it was something we never expected to do. You know, we thought Steel Sky would be forgotten and buried. So when it came back on because Apple actually came to see us. They came to see us in York. I mean, they don't do this anymore. But back when the iPhone came out, they were going around sending people out to talk to developers about how great the iPhone was going to be. So they were actually selling to us, you know. They were going like, the iPhone, it's going to be a big success. And we were like, are you sure? Are you sure? But believed them, and we agreed to do a port of Steel Sky, and it did really well. And it was when we announced it, it blew up on Twitter, and it was easier than the first time around as well. So. Yeah, it was a good thing.
I had 10 minutes running, and we had to talk about a new game, X Warrior. 2 of the 3 guys were involved in it, Stu and Tony. It's exploration action RPG, I would say. Can you tell us something about this project and what we can await?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of met a couple of years ago, and we started this idea of we joked about making a game together. And we just thought about doing a very quick game. Then we thought about it a bit, let's do something really big and worthwhile and do it multi-format. So we came up with this plan for a couple of years to do various versions. And we're at a stage now where we're doing it on the Amiga. So we're going to be launching on the Amiga. It is running on the Amiga, which is fantastic. But the game is an arcade game with sort of RPG elements, not a lot, just a little bit of RPG in there, just to give you a bit of story and background as you play it, and get more involved in the actual characters. But it's pretty much in the traditional mold where you just pick up and play. You know, there's none of this bullshit about having to read manuals and learn, you know, tutorials and all this sort of stuff. You just pick up and play. And the response we've had so far has been absolutely phenomenal. We took it to shows, people have played it, and they've come back. And we're also getting like children who have not played these sort of games before, and they're playing it. And it was like, wow, this is really cool. Really cool. It's, as I say, it's coming out on the Amiga AGA, and then we've got other plans to do other formats later next year. And I've got some A5 flyers, if anybody wants one with some information on it. Please come up to me afterwards, and I'll gladly either sign it, we'll both sign it, or just take one with you. And you can sell them on eBay for €5. So,
Yeah, what Stu said, really. I mean, it's really exciting to be back on the Amiga. I mean, again, it's something we never thought would happen, but it looks like the Amiga's coming back in a big way. I mean, this show's overwhelming. So many people. It's amazing. You know, there's new machines, new Amigas coming out, and you know, we'll do our bit at our side, writing new games for the Amiga. The hardware guys will do new hardware, and hopefully everything comes together, and you know, the Amiga goes from strength to strength. It's great to be part of it.
Yeah, okay.
I should have added that we are setting up a website for pre-orders, which will be going live within the next couple of months. We're not going to do a crowdfunder for the Amiga version because the game's already running, and we thought that's a bit cheeky, really. So we're going to do a pre-order, so you just order it, and then we'll just give you an update when it's ready. And it'll be a box for RJ's got one, and it'll be a big box version as well as digital. And we're really into like physical releases as well because we love that whole. We're from an era where box games was the thing. You know, you go into a shop and you see box games. It's just open it up, you get the lovely colour manual, maybe some like a poster, and we love all that stuff. So that's what we're doing with this game. But please, when you check out the website, please keep coming back because we will be doing updates on there, and you'll be able to get all the information. So yeah, thank you.
Simon, any new games from you in the next month or years?
Yeah, I've been working on stuff for the ZX Spectrum Next, which a lot of people, you know, sort of point fingers at and go, oh, it just wants to be an Amiga, which it's not far off. So I've been making my the game we've just released, a game called O, try and get it out. It's just on the Amiga, it's just a platformer. There are people here who have played it and say that it's way too hard. But that's just because they're crap at playing games. But it too has had really good feedback. I've also been working on stuff for the Mega Drive, and yeah, after seeing today's show, I'm going to go back to the UK and like really push and say, look, there is an audience, and we really should be doing our games for the Amiga crowd. We can't just say, oh, just put it on Steam, because everyone's got a PC or, you know. No. You deserve quality games. There are quality games from the past on show. There are quality games being developed now, and I'd like to be part of that market. Not necessarily financially. It's just, I always like putting another game on the CV. It just gives me a happy, warm feeling.
Yeah, time is running. We have time for some questions from the audience, I hope. Anyone wants to ask? Come to the stage, please.
Okay, so my question is about cannon fodder. Playing it recently, I thought, wow, like this is like a huge, like pointed criticism of like militarism and like war propaganda, and I was wondering, like, did you do that on purpose, or did I read too much into it?
Yeah, I mean, it was never intended to promote war. It's an arcade game, point and click, you know, with us using the mouse. The media picked up on it, and they kind of turned it into something it wasn't. In fact, it's because when you lose a soldier, I mean, I'll give you a quick story. When we put the names into the game, because originally we had the soldiers walking around, and they were just sprites. Yeah, we put the names in, and we was like, wow, because you associated with the character, and even though they're the same, all of a sudden it created a human connection in the heart that soldier's now died. You know, so it's an anti-war game, but the press, they like to sensationalise stuff, and they demonised the game when it really was an anti-war game. Always was and always will be.
Okay, we got the sign. We had to stop now because we had a lot of things here to do today. Thanks for joining us. If someone wants to hear more of them in our Retrokompott podcast, we have interviews with all of the three guys, more than 1 hour for one person. It's easier to understand it there. Thanks for joining us, and sorry for the short time here. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.